Greetings again. This is Lawrence Houlgate, the author of Understanding John Locke. We are now moving on to Chapter 3 in my book, the title of which is The State of War, and this is Episode 5. I don't want to confuse you about this. Episode 5 of the podcast on John Locke. So, the state of war. And in this chapter, Locke moves from a definition of the state of war to the conclusion that the state of nature has all the ingredients for fomenting war between those people who are in the state of nature. In the final section of the chapter that I'm reading, he signals that there is a possible solution for avoiding this war of all against all. So let's see what he means. 3.1, definition of the state of war. Locke defines the state of war as a relationship between two individuals in which one is declared by word or action not a passionate and hasty, but a sedate, settled design upon another man's life. That's a quote from paragraph 16 in the Treatise, the second treatise of government, that is. Now, when Locke uses the word war, he's not thinking about armies of men at battle, nor does Locke require an attempt of one man to kill another as a condition for saying that the first man is at war with that other. All that Locke requires for the existence of a state of war is that one person has a settled design, that is, an intention to kill another person. That's it. That's all he requires. An attempt on the part of John to kill Peter might be unsuccessful, but it is the implied intent of John to kill Peter that shows that the state of war exists between these two men. And to put this in the language of the logician, an attempt to kill is a sufficient, but not yet a necessary condition of the state of war. Section 3.2 in my book, Understanding John Locke, Chapter 3, Section 3.2, with the title, Justifiable Responses to a Declaration of War. In the same paragraph that we were just looking at, that is paragraph 16 in the treatise, Locke says that it is, quote, reasonable and just that we have a right to destroy anyone who threatens to kill us. That phrase, threatens to kill, says more than intends to kill. John might intend to kill Peter, but suppose that he never voices this intention. That is, he never communicates his intent to Peter. Locke might argue that an intention constitutes a threat whenever and however one person finds out that another has an intention to kill him. If Peter finds out by accident that John intends to kill him, let's say he overheard the conversation to this effect, then the intent rises to the level of a threat. We have a right to destroy anyone who threatens to kill us, Locke says, because there is a, quote, fundamental law of nature that says that when all cannot be preserved, the safety of the innocent is to be preferred. If John attacks Peter, and Peter's life cannot be preserved unless he or someone else kills John, then it is reasonable and just that Peter or someone who is defending Peter has a right to kill John. Locke goes even further when he writes that it is justifiable to kill a person who has got one or who has got me in his power. Let's suppose that you are the person, not me. Let's suppose you are the person who is in the power of someone else. And here's what Locke says at paragraph 17 of the second treatise. Quote, I have reason to conclude that he who would get me into his power without my consent would use me as he pleased when he got me there, and destroy me too when he had a fancy to it. And reason bids me look on him as an enemy to my preservation who would take away that freedom which is the fence to it. Locke makes the further remark that the man who attempts to kill him can be treated the same as he would treat a lion or wolf that attempts to kill him. There's no difference between the two, between the lion and the man, between the wolf and the man. It is the threat of being killed that justifies him in destroying the life of the being who threatens his life, not the species of that being. If Peter is justified in killing the wolf who attacks him, then Peter is also justified in killing any man who attacks him. The justification is to be found in the natural law of self-preservation, which declares that everyone has a duty to preserve her own life and the lives of others. Section 3.3 of Chapter 3. Enslavement as a declaration of war is the title. Now, when Locke uses the word enslaving, he means getting another person into his power without that person's consent. I'll repeat that. Enslaving means getting another person into his power without that person's consent. We're now at paragraph 17 of Second Treatise. Locke also says that a person makes me a slave when he compels me by force, quote, to that which is against the right of my freedom, end quote. If anyone attempts to make me a slave, then he would use me as he pleased, even killing me if this is what pleases him. This act of enslaving me, therefore, puts himself into a state of war with me. If an attempt to enslave a person is to declare war on that person, then that person has a right to resist. Another quote from Locke at paragraph 17. He that in the state of nature would take away the freedom that belongs to anyone in that state must necessarily be supposed to have a design to take away everything else, that freedom being the foundation of all the rest, end quote. Moving on to section 3.4 of chapter 3, with the title, It is Lawful to Kill a Thief. Locke applies the same logic to situations in which a person is confronted by an armed robber. Locke, by the way, uses the word thief, not the word armed robber. Suppose that Esther approaches Conrad, points a gun at him, and demands that he hand over his wallet. This makes it lawful for Conrad to kill Esther if he can do this. This is so, even if Esther has not yet hurt Conrad, nor even said that she would kill him, or even hurt him if she does not do his bidding. Quote, It is lawful for a man to kill a thief, who has not in the least hurt him, nor declared any design upon his life, using force, where he has no right to get me into his power, let his pretense be what it will, I have no reason to suppose that he who would take away my liberty would not, when he had me in his power, take away everything else. And therefore it is lawful for me to treat him as one who has put himself into a state of war with me, that is, kill him if I can. For to that hazard does he justly expose himself, whoever introduces a state of war and is aggressor in it, end quote. That is Second Treatise, paragraph 18. Back to my book. There are two reasons that Locke takes the position that it is lawful to kill a thief. First, in the Esther Conrad example, Esther has put herself in a state of war with Conrad because she's using force to get Conrad in her power. She's taking away his liberty. Second, Conrad has no reason to suppose that having him in her power, Esther will not kill him. He doesn't know what she's going to do with him. All he knows right now is that she has him in her power. Even though she has not yet hurt him, or said that she would hurt him if he did not comply, it is the uncertainty of what Esther, who is the thief in this case, will do when she has taken away his liberty that makes it justifiable for Conrad to defend himself, even if defending himself means he must kill her. Esther has put herself in a state of war with Conrad, and it is lawful for Conrad to kill her if he can, quote, for to that hazard does she justly expose herself, end quote. Section 3.5 of Chapter 3, The State of Nature and the State of War. At this point in Second Treatise, we have been told that the state of nature is a condition of mankind in which each person has perfect freedom and equality. No man needs to obey the will of any other man, and all men are morally equal, no one having authority over anyone else. And we've also been told that there is a law of nature that governs human behavior, and this law imposes on all persons the duty not to harm one another in their life, liberty, health, or possessions. Although human freedom is perfect, in the sense that no one must bend to the will of anyone else, this perfect freedom, so-called, is restricted by the natural law. That sounds like a contradiction, doesn't it? Moreover, because no one has authority over anyone else, it follows that all persons have the equal right to punish anyone who they believe has offended the law of nature. And it's here that Locke finds his final polished definition of the state of nature. Here's the quote, paragraph 19, second treatise. It is men living together, according to reason, without a common superior on earth, with authority to judge between them. I'll repeat that. Here is the definition of the state of nature. It's the state of men living together according to reason, without a common superior on earth, who has authority to judge between them. And yet it is precisely because there is no common superior on earth with the authority to judge between men on those occasions when they have a dispute, that they are put into a state of war. If one man attempts to use force against another to punish him for a perceived transgression of the natural law, or perhaps to obtain a remedy for some personal harm he has suffered, then his declaration of force against the offender is a declaration of war. Again, a quote from John Locke. Force, or a declared design of force upon the person of another, when there is no common superior on earth to appeal to for relief, there's no judge, in other words, that is the state of war. So if someone has a design of force upon me or upon you, if there's no common superior on earth, there's no judge who I can appeal to, there's no government who I can appeal to for relief, then that person is now in a state of war with me. Locke does not go so far as to say that the state of nature is necessarily a state of war. Unlike his predecessor, Thomas Hobbes, Locke makes the more modest claim that the state of nature is in a state of what he calls precipitous peace. It is always in danger of evolving into a state of war, but it's not necessarily a state of war. That's the distinction between Locke and Hobbes on the state of nature. It's not necessarily a state of war, according to Locke. And in argument form, here's how Locke gets to this conclusion. I'm looking at the ending paragraph of in 3.5 in the book. It's in bold type. Here's how Locke gets to that conclusion that we're talking about, that the state of nature will probably lead to a state of war. Not necessarily, but probably. He begins with the premise that in the state of nature, all persons are equal, no one having any authority over anyone else. Premise 2, if all persons are equal, then all persons have the right to punish those who violate the law of nature. It's not just one, there is no government, right? So everybody has the right to punish anyone who they think violates the state of nature. Everybody is a judge and executioner. Third premise. If all persons have the right to punish those who violate the law of nature, then any person can exercise this right by using force or threatening to use force in the event of what they believe to be a disobedience. Premise 4. To use force or threaten to use force is to make or declare war on another. Premise 5. To make or declare war on another is to put both in a state of war. Premise 6. Many persons will exercise their right to punish those who violate the law of nature. And therefore we get to the conclusion, which we'll call line number 7. Therefore, the state of nature will probably lead to a state of war. The most we get is probability out of Locke on this, not certainty. 3.6. How to avoid a state of war. It is now obvious how those in the state of nature can avoid falling off the precipice into a state of war. They can only do this by putting themselves into society and quitting the state of nature. Why? Because, quote, where there is an authority, a power on earth from which relief can be had by appeal, there the continuance of the state of war is excluded and the controversy is going to be decided by that power. That is paragraph 21 in the second treatise. We can avoid the state of war, he's saying, if we can just establish an authority, a power on earth from which relief can be had by appeal. If persons have that, then they need not go after one another, threatening force against them. They can appeal to a judge. So we're left wondering, how is this to be done? How do those who are in the state of nature leave the state of nature? And once having left it, how is the judicial power to settle controversies between two or more persons to be assigned? Locke doesn't answer this question until chapters 7 and 8 of the second treatise, so we're going to have to wait for an answer of that. I'm going to stop at this point because we're getting into questions about methodology, which I'll talk about in the next in the next episode, which would be episode 6. Please listen and have a good evening, a good day, whatever day it is. Thank you. Bye-bye.